Welcome back to our classroom. Today, I have Jerry Colbert with me, the co-creator and co-runner of National Geographic's #1 series, Brain Games, for which he received a Primetime Emmy nomination. Colbert and Atomic are frequent collaborators with icon Pharrell Williams, having created and produced Brainchild on Netflix with Pharrell, as well as two upcoming documentaries. Colbert is the co-creator and co-host of the world's most popular three times weekly kids educational podcast, Who Smarted, which had over 15 million downloads in its first 3 years. He always knew that one day he would bring his love of entertainment and disdain for outdated one-size-fits-all education together, and Brain Games provided the first of many opportunities to show what was possible. Since 2010, Colbert, his team at Atomic, and their amazing partners have been responsible for some of the most successful and beloved edutainment programming in the world. Welcome, Jerry.
Thanks, man. Listen, I've listened to your show. I love your intros. Having you do that for me personally, I kind of want you to like introduce me before every meeting I go into. That was that was amazing.
Listen,
That
Jerry.
made me feel so good. Like, thank you. Thank
Jerry,
you.
stop. You need no introduction. 15 million downloads, man. You introduce me. Introduce me to somebody. 15 million, that's crazy.
We'll figure that out. We'll figure that out. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, we figured some stuff out with our show to help grow it a lot. And I think we also really hit a sweet spot with Who Smarted during the pandemic. A lot
Hmm.
of parents wanted to get their kids off the screens. And so we had a lot of growth then. But yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about screens momentarily,
Cool.
but just want to get into your journey into edutainment. Certainly, it has been inspiring, and want to consider like your experience with brain games and the other projects that you have shaped to approach creating engaging educational content for kids, which is fascinating for me on many levels. One, because I'm an educator
Mhm.
by trade, right? That's been my background for a long time. And in recent years, I've been focusing on educational consulting and content creation. But I also have three young kids. And my kids are 9, 6, and 3.
Hmm.
Actually, she just turned 4. And so I'm always thinking about like, all right, how can I maintain the balance, right?
Hmm.
I, I don't want to keep them completely off the screens because I think there's some value that they could gain from using technological devices, but I don't want them on it too much.
Yeah.
So I try to find a balance, and
Yeah.
then I'm trying to find educational games and educational content that I feel is going to bring great value,
Hmm.
such as brain games. So I'm interested to learn a bit about your journey and your approach and your thinking and how it is you and your team are shaping this content.
Yeah, so I mean, my journey, I would say, actually started when I was a student back in Miami. I grew up in South Florida, and I was very into science, math, all of that, but I really struggled with how it was taught in school, even though I was like doing all kinds of science kits and Museum of Science stuff and all that stuff, and reading about physics outside of class. But for some
Wow.
reason, I just didn't resonate with it in the way it was taught, and I was not a great student. I mean, if you told any of my science teachers from high school that I was making huge science shows for Nat Geo, they would tell you that you definitely had the wrong Jerry Colbert. They would
No,
not
not my
say
Jerry.
that,
Not
not
my
that guy.
Jerry.
Yeah. So then I got into making television, and I worked on a lot of different kinds of shows. I worked on scripted shows with Dick Wolf, who does New York Undercover and Law and Order back in the
Oh
day.
no, yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. So that's where my first job in TV. Then I started getting my first unscripted show was Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, the original one back in the day. And that was the first time I was like, wow, like you could actually use unscripted series to actually open up people's minds and show them viewpoints that they wouldn't have thought of and actually maybe change the way people think. And that really stuck with me. And then, like, after about 10 years of making kind of unscripted reality stuff, I started to feel like I was like, how do I marry that idea of like education and opening minds with science and teaching people about the world? And between my own experiences in high school and like that, working on Queer Eye, I worked at Children's Television Workshop for a little bit, where I learned how they think about educating children with Sesame Street. And I had this insight, which is, only children's television ever talks to the viewer. Right. So when your kids are watching Sesame Street, it's like, can you count to five? Can you say the ABCs? Right. So the show's talking to them. And I was like, Well, why can't we do that with adults, right? Crazy idea, but it worked, and that became Brain Games. And Brain Games was the first show where they let us really try this idea of having the show talk directly to the viewer and ask them to participate with the show. Not with, you don't need another screen or an iPad. It was just like experiments were happening in the show that you're watching, and you're doing them in real time. And it was really, really successful. Like you said, it got us a Primetime Emmy nomination, but more importantly than that, we just heard so many families and kids telling us that they really felt like their minds were changed by watching that show, that they started to understand how the brain works. And once that Pandora's box was open for me, there was no going back to making, you know, good stuff like regular reality television or anything like. I was like, that's it. We have to just focus consistently on edutainment and actually changing the way people learn and changing the way they get excited about things. So that's how I got, that was how I got to where I am now. That was, back in 2012 when we launched Brain Games.
That's great, man. And I love to hear you elaborate on the why. Like what is it? What you mentioned your own experience, but is there something else that's also driving your why behind, hey, there's no going back to this.
Hmm.
We open the Pandora's box, we're gonna lock in right here.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if you want I don't talk about this a lot, but I'll tell you my deeper why. I think we live in a world where there's just a lot of problems, right? I mean, and I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about resources. Whether or not you believe in climate change being caused by humans, it's happening, right?
Right.
Like that's indisputable. Like something's going on with the climate.
Yeah.
Whether or not you believe in resources dwindling and air pollution, whether you believe in the causes or not, it's happening. And so our theory, the thing that motivates me and my producing partner Adam Davis is we're not going to be we're not going to be on the planet in 100 years, but the kids, people who are children today, are going to be here in 50 years. They're going to be here in 60 years, and there's only going to be technological solutions to our problems, right? We're not all going to suddenly change our behavior. It's just not how humans work, right? We tend not to change our behavior until there is a cataclysmic event, and at that point, it's a little late. But I do believe I'm very hopeful when we talk to scientists all the time and researchers, and I'm actually very hopeful that all of the problems we have are going to be solved by technology, whether it's power, resource, water stuff. It's going to be solved, but it's going to be solved by someone who's 7 years old today, or 10 years old today, or 11 years old today. And if those kids are only getting exposed to kind of mindless entertainment that's not inspiring them to learn how to think critically and explore and be curious, then we are not activating all of the minds that could be activated to solve tomorrow's problems. We have to be doing that today, right? And so all of our that's the deeper why for what we do. Whether we're talking to adults or kids, we are trying to make people think more critically and maybe inspire someone to actually go into a field where they start to solve problems, where they become an engineer or a scientist or whatever they do, where they become part of the solution. So that's my deeper why, because I just think there's not enough media addressing. It's all the stuff around is so negative, and I'm like, let's be positive. Let's be positive. Let's be aspirational. So that's our deeper why.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to sit my kids down later and be like, hey, Jerry Colbert said you need to solve the problems that await you, the problems of now and
Yeah.
the problems of tomorrow. You need to solve that.
Mhm.
So, no more watching Descendants and all these other TV shows that they just sing these songs repetitively, and it drives me crazy. I'm like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need a break from these songs. All right, I need y'all to go and fix climate change because Jerry said so.
Well, see, here's the thing. And yes, I look, by the way, I watch junk stuff. I love it. We all gotta have fun and turn our brains off. But what we try to do is make our learning shows as much fun as that stuff. That's our secret sauce.
Best
Like
way to
kids,
learn.
right? They listen to Who Smarted, 15 minutes, there's a great theme song, it's a fun journey, and at the end, it's like, oh, they just learned three things about something they didn't know about. A lot of times they're learning three things about something they didn't even think they could understand, right? So that's how I pitch the show to people. I'm like, look, you're gonna have so much fun. You're not gonna realize you're learning. That's what we do.
I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, Manny. He owns the Royal Diaspora coffee shop here in Tampa, and he was asking me like, "Hey, my son's 5 years old. When do you think I should get him started on basketball drills? Because and I was also a basketball coach. And I said, hey man, start them now. The earlier the better.
Hmm.
But just keep this in mind. Like when you're drilling them, try to make it as fun as possible.
Yep.
Because if he's having fun, like he won't even think about the fact that like you're going through drills. Just
Hmm.
having fun and wanting to be with you, and it's connection time between the both of y'all, but you're also teaching them some fun skill building and drills. And so and I told him like sometimes I need that reminder. Because
Hmm.
sometimes I'm so locked in on like, now we got to master this drill that I'm taking the fun out of it, and I've seen my son's not enjoying it. But when I do it in a way that's fun for him, I see he's more engaged. He'll start doing it on his own, and so I need those reminders. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And that's right. I mean, it's great advice for your friend too, because you get kids in by making it fun. At some point, there's going to be some hard work. It's not always going to be fun, but yeah, you can't start with the punishing drills because they're just like, no, thank you. I think that was maybe my problem in math class was the drills. Yeah, yeah,
Well, you reach a lot of young listeners,
yeah,
and through Who Smarted, the vehicle you use was audio
yeah,
storytelling.
yeah.
And I'm wondering what motivated you to take this approach, and what unique benefits do you think audio provides compared to visual mediums, especially because in this day and age, it seems like you need visuals for everything,
Hmm.
but you had success. And I know you mentioned that you also hit that sweet spot during COVID. Uh, but that's quite the sweet spot. You hit a cavity. You hit
Yeah,
a cavity, Jerry.
yeah. Listen, I don't buy into this thing that everything needs visuals. I think I think there's a lot of cliches that get thrown around now. Like everyone needs to be a content creator. You have to have visuals. You got to be on YouTube. I actually believe that every project has its own rhythm. Every project has its own nuances. And so for us, Who Smarted came out of this moment in the pandemic because we'd just done Brainchild, which was an educational series we did with Pharrell Williams for Netflix for kids. And that show was awesome and it was doing well. But what we realized was unless you were a kid who had a Netflix subscription, who happened to have the algorithm recommend that show to you, you weren't going to see it. Right? So it was there, but not totally accessible. And it just was this sort of magical moment of like coming out of that. The pandemic happened. We couldn't shoot any of the shows we were scheduled to shoot. We had all of these researchers, writers, producers on staff, and we'd always thought about doing a podcast because the thing with audio is it's not only available everywhere to literally any kid, any adult who has any kind of internet connection, it's also you can listen to it anywhere, right? You don't have to be watching. So you can be listening in the car. You can be listening in bed. You don't need the story, the visuals. And then also with the pandemic, it was like, man, we got to get kids. Kids are on screens all day long. It's not good. So it was this kind of magical moment. We're like, all right, let's launch the podcast. Let's do it. And we were like, we were recording on like, $50 mics that we had at home in our closets. We were editing everything ourselves. We were everything. Like it was like three or four of us were making the show for the first 6 months. And it started to get bigger and we were like, okay, so we're doing this 3 times a week. We can't keep up with this. We either need help. So we started to build out our crew a little bit. And the show kept getting bigger and bigger. And yeah, that's how it happened. It was just this magical moment for us. Like I think, a lot of things happened to align. Um, but then, there came a point where we're like, okay, now we have to actually start thinking about how to market the show and grow the show. And because it was, as like these shows cost money to make, and we had writers and actors and all this. At some point, we're like, all right, we got to turn this into a business. So that's when we got really serious about podcasting about 6 or 7 months in. So yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
That's great. And
yeah,
and you mentioned the need to make it accessible.
yeah.
Can you talk? Maybe you could just kind of share a few strategies of what you and your team have employed that you found effective in making the learning both accessible and captivating for children.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we realized sort of accidentally with audio is you don't see the characters, right? And so when we do a TV show, whoever the host of the show is, it's a person, right? They look how they look, and you either are into them or you're not into them or you're neutral. We didn't really think about this. I don't want to take, I don't like taking, I don't, I'm not some, I know a lot of people look back at everything they did and they're like, hey, I had this idea. And, there are some things that were kind of accidental. And one of those was because it's audio, you never see the host of the show. And so every kid gets to imagine that the host is whoever they want the host to be.
Mhm.
And the magic of that for making a show accessible to kids, whether they're white, black, Asian, young man, young woman, trans, like whatever, they get to see whoever they want the host to be. And we didn't really do that on purpose, but when kids started sending us in drawings of who the host was, like the kids would start, every single one is different. They're like some think it's a man, some think it's a woman, some think it's an older person, some think it's a kid. Like it's all over the spectrum, and we're like, okay, that's actually really cool, because that makes the show the host of the show who takes them on the journey. Every single kid sees themselves in that,
Mhm.
and that's pretty magical because then you've got an entry point for any kid. Nobody's excluded based on how the host looks. So that was huge. That's probably the biggest accessibility thing that we've seen.
That's cool. That must have been pretty cool for you and your team to receive those drawings and to just be able to tap into the imagination of your audience. I mean,
Yeah.
like, oh, this is what they see. This is how they connect. This is what they're engaging with
Yeah.
in their minds.
I do the voice of the host because when we started doing the show, it was like, okay, you do it. You have a microphone at home. And then by the time I was like, all right, let's cast a host, everyone was like, we can't change it now. We got like, 100,000 kids listening. It's you. I'm not an actor. But what was funny is like the number of people who listen to the show and they're who I know who are like, don't realize it's me. Because I do kind of a
Wow.
little bit of a voice, but like a lot of people think it's a woman hosting the show. I'm like, fine, whatever. As long as, if you guys don't know it's me,
Uh,
that's great. So yeah, but totally, totally fun. Like we've had such a good time making the show. And yeah, like all that was a little accidental, but now it's very deliberate. Now we're like, okay, we never put out an image, I mean, people can look me up and figure it out, but we let it be a little mysterious.
well, let's tap into the future of edutainment.
Yeah.
What trends or innovations do you believe hold the most promise for transforming how children learn and interact with educational content? I would
Yeah.
imagine you and your team talk about this or studying this, researching this
Yeah.
to inform your approach, your practice. And so I'm curious, what are you coming across?
The biggest transformation I think we'll see is some sort of individualized learning. I think there's always enormous value to having kids in a room with a teacher, whether that's in a traditional classroom or in a homeschool with a parent or guardian. I don't think that in my mind at least, like a future without a physical human adult present doesn't seem great because you want a real person there to help model behavior and help answer questions. But I do think that over the next few years, we're going to see AI develop to where it can offer personalized learning paths for kids because every kid learns differently, right? Some kids are visual learners, some are book learners, some are audio, some are, and there's all these different kinds of intelligence. Some kids are more athletic, some are more musical, some are more verbal. And so if there's a way to make it possible to meet each kid with the same material, but where their strength is and how they understand and learn, that would be huge, right? Because teachers teachers don't have the bandwidth to do that, right? People are always like, why
Hard.
can't teachers like meet every kid? Like you got 30 kids in a class times six classes. You got your own life, your own kids at home, plus all of the standardized testing, everything. Like teachers are already like maxed out. But if AI could help make it so that kids can actually get a little bit more of a personalized learning path without being more of a burden on the teachers, I think it actually helps the teachers and the kids, and it actually makes for better students. So that's where I see my as you said my disdain for one size fits all education. I do think that could be an amazing development.
Yeah, I mean, I have a disdain for one size fits all education also, and I'm extremely curious about the ways that we're stepping into the future and how we're going to utilize these tools that are made available to us instead of fight what's going to happen, right? I mean, the
Mhm.
technology's here, AI is here, so how can we leverage it to better support our students? And I know there are there are a number of folks under the realm of education that are wrestling with this,
Hmm.
that are some are exploring some stuff and probably onto some good things, and others, like anything else, you're always going to have folks that are resistant, and then you have a lot of folks that are in between. They're just not sure, they don't know, they need the tools, they need the guidance. So it's it'll be interesting for me to see how educators might look at some of what you and your team are doing and perhaps, incorporate some of that approach.
Hmm.
Um, and that also has me wondering what advice it is that you would offer educators and parents looking to foster a love of learning in today's tech-driven world. And you started to give us some advice now.
Yeah, I would go back to what we were just talking about with like drills and making it fun. Um, you know, kids love to have fun. Adults love to have fun. And we too often make learning feel like a burden, There's too much homework, there's too many things to memorize, and that might be impossible to change just given the way the system is set up now. But if you can find any ways to make it fun, whether it's introducing media like Who Smarted or other shows that are fun for kids, or gamifying the learning process. So instead of, you have to do X, Y, and Z, it's like do X, you earn this, do Y, you earn this, like sort of having a little fun. It's amazing how if you add points to anything, like take anything and add points, even though there's no prize necessarily, there is something intuitively, like deeply primally competitive in all of us, that if you can have like a little bit of a fun competition, that makes things more fun. Um, but the biggest thing I tell parents all the time is like make sure you don't don't do anything to make your kids less curious. Support their curiosity, right?
Yeah.
And one of the challenges with being a parent is the whys. Kids are like, just like, why this? How's this work? And at some point, a lot of parents are like, I don't know, stop asking me questions. That is not great for your kid's curiosity. I know, I totally get why people say that. So we've come up with a little thing where we've told people, like, if your kid's asking too many questions, instead of telling them to stop asking questions, have them take a little notepad or in their phone or whatever and write down their questions, and then find like 45 minutes or an hour when you can actually sit quietly with them at a computer and go on like a little journey with them and like start looking up the answers to their questions, because not only will you satisfy their curiosity, it's also an opportunity to start teaching them critical thinking about sources, right? Is one source more reliable than another source? Who's giving you the answers? So it becomes like a learning opportunity and a bonding opportunity. So those are my big things. Like just keep kids curious and introduce fun, as often as you can.
Yeah, multicultural classroom, one of our norms when we're doing professional development or even student-facing work like literacy workshops, one of the norms is lead with curiosity. And really, that's been helpful in our approach. And even for me as a parent, when my kids are often asking why, I said, go and research it.
Right.
Tell me what you come back with.
Exactly. Right. Teach me.
Yeah.
Teach me. Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes they come back and the research is accurate, and sometimes it's not, and they need to be guided.
Yep.
Uh, but really, it's a way for me to empower them to
Yes.
go and obtain that information on their own. Like you are perfectly capable. Now, in some situations, not. Some situations, all right, no, I actually need to, either provide the information or help them learn how to seek it. But, wherever it's age appropriate, I'm like, hey, go and do some research.
Yep. Yeah. It's a great way to makes them feel like not just like they're being talked to, but like they're part of their own story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. Part of your own story. Maybe I'll start using, hey, go build out your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a question? Go build out your story. That's what Jerry
I
told
love
me.
that.
Uh,
I like that I'm going to start to be used around your house.
that's
Jerry,
right. Hey man,
you're going to be like, who's Jerry?
Jerry, I'm weaponizing you. This Jerry guy, I can't stand him. Until they watch the show and then, oh my goodness, he's great. I love him. Daddy, can we see more Jerry shows? Hey, got to limit the screen time around here. All right,
Yes.
little bit of brain games. Jerry, I want you to give us maybe one or two sentences. If you had, not if you had, what is your message of encouragement to our audience in one or two sentences? Like, obviously there's a lot going on in the world as we know, and I appreciate that you want to keep us on a positive outlook. So what's a brief message of encouragement that you could offer our audience?
I think telling parents and educators, just reminding them to that learning doesn't just happen in the classroom. You know, that's a thing that I think kids and parents and educators can get kind of caught up in the idea that school is for learning, and then everywhere else is something else. But really telling kids that the whole world is a classroom, right? The whole world is full of opportunities to explore and be curious and investigate and research, and you can connect it back to stuff in the classroom. That's amazing when you can do that. But that's my biggest takeaway is just remind everybody that the whole entire universe is a fun classroom to explore and be curious and discover and learn new things. That's my that's my 100,000 foot view.
Thank you, thank you. Now, if you had the opportunity, Jerry, to have lunch with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Michelle Obama. That's
That's a
always my
good
answer
pick.
to that question.
That's a good pick. Why Michelle Obama?
It's a very specific reason, Michelle Obama. I've always loved Michelle Obama. I've thought she's her commitment to kids and education and nutrition has all like was very inspiring. I think she's also just like the coolest first lady we've ever had. Um, but I also, so she started a production company with Barack, and it's called Higher Ground. They do a lot of really cool stuff, but I find that most of the work they're doing is the kind of stuff that I call sort of like preaching to the choir, where it's like it's got a great message, but the way it's containerized is only going to appeal to people who already kind of agree with it. So I would love to have lunch with her because I would just want to have like just one lunch and say like, listen, I'm just going to give you like 10 ideas on how you can do exactly what you're doing with Higher Ground with the reach and inspiration you have, but make all of that material accessible to people who don't agree with you, right? So you're creating entry points for conversation and inspiration for people who aren't already on your team. That's why Michelle Obama.
So what I hear you saying, Jerry, is you want to executive produce Higher Ground.
That's pretty much it. Or at
But
least give a little advice. I don't do they have some great executive producers. I just think, it's one of those things where I'm like, man, if they could just a tiny tweak to what they're doing, they would be reaching like people across the political spectrum in a better way. And I don't honestly think there's any couple who's doing more like deep work around these issues than them at that high level. So that's yeah, that would be my
that's
my
good,
my,
man.
my lunch with Michelle.
Michelle Obama, if you're hearing this, set that lunch up. And when the show reaches the masses across the political spectrum, please remember to give our classroom credit.
Yes. And by the way, Michelle, I'm not looking for a fee. I'm not looking to become part of your company. Just one lunch, I'll give you some advice. It'll change what you're doing.
Oh, that's dope. That's
She might
awesome.
be listening, dude. So, we don't know.
Hey,
We don't know.
man, I do not limit the possibilities. Jerry, thank you. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for sharing about all the work that you're doing, about things that we should be considering, that educators should be considering, that parents should be considering, and even that kids should be considering. How it is that they could connect and absorb and process meaningful edutainment to inform all the stuff that they're learning and all the stuff that they're curious about so that they can ultimately change our world. Beautiful message, and we appreciate the insight that you shared with us today here in our classroom, and look forward to not just the current work that you're doing, but the upcoming documentaries and all the other work that you and your team at Atomic will be involved with.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate your time.